Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 27 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. What is the very best way to enhance, deepen, and enjoy your sex life more? This is, of course, in the context of an intimate marriage, a long-term relationship. What is the most important thing that you can do? We're going to get into that. That's what this episode is all about. But first, I really want to thank RP Lovely, that's such a fun name, for the rating and review that you left on iTunes. You said, "Amazing content!" exclamation point. Actually, my kids, when they were learning to read, they used to call them excals. So amazing content, excol. Dr. Alexandra teaches complex ideas in an easy to understand, relatable way. Even if you feel like you already have a good marriage, you will learn so much from her. Excol. Well, thank you for that. That is exactly what I'm aspiring to, and I really think that's a great review to read as I dive into today's topic. However, let me first say that the ratings and reviews make such a difference in telling people whether or not this is a podcast worth listening to. So if you're new to the podcast and you enjoy this episode, please leave a rating and a review. And if you're a longtime listener or a sometime listener and you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review. It really is the best way to give back, pay it forward, and have more and more couples having the kinds of marriages that I'm talking about. And I hope you're experiencing or seeing how it would be possible for you to experience it. And that just seems like the right segue to head into what the single best thing that you can do to enhance your sex life. Is it to become more fit, more attractive, get sex toys, learn techniques and try fancy positions, to role play, to go on vacation without your kids and be able to make as much noise and feel as free as you want? Is it to have a really romantic dinner? Is it to buy new lingerie? Is it to make sure that you're going on date nights regularly? Well, the fact is that while every single one of those has its appeal and can certainly bring more pleasure, I would never recommend you don't do any of the things I've just said if they're appealing to you. They're not actually the best, most effective, most influential, most impactful, and longest lasting thing that you can do to improve your sex life. So what is it? The very best thing that you can do to improve your sex life and create results that last for the rest of your lives is to talk about sex, to talk about the sex you're having, to talk about the sex you want to have, to talk about healthy sex with one another, healthy, happy, erotically inspiring sex with one another. Are you surprised? I have to say, I was when I first encountered this statistic, it's not really a statistic, this piece of data, which I'll say more about in a minute. But then when I started thinking about it, it makes so much sense to me, because when we have emotional intimacy, when we have closeness and connection in the context of a long-term relationship, that is the best foreplay, the best hors d'oeuvres, the best way to make it more likely that you open up not just your hearts and minds, but your bodies too. And similarly, if you're having sex, you don't actually know what your partner is thinking. You can guess based on their responses, but you don't really know what their experience is unless you verbally share it with one another. So it does make sense. And in fact, there's not a whole lot of research on the positive predictors of a long-lasting, happy, sexually satisfying marriage. I guess if there were a pill for it, there'd be a lot more research and development on the part of pharmaceutical companies and others, but there just isn't really a great deal of research. But the most foremost researcher when it comes to long-lasting relationships is John Gottman, Dr. John Gottman. And one of the things he says very clearly is that the single most important, best positive predictor of a healthy, long-lasting sex life is talking about the sex you're having. And in fact, in my experience, both with couples I've coached and the world at large, people are so much more comfortable having sex than they are talking about the sex they're having, and often just talking about sex at all, whether it's their sex or not. But when it comes to couples with long-lasting marriages and happy sex lives, 91% of them share that they talk about the sex they're having. That means if you're not talking about it, your chances of having a really great sex life are 9%. So I hope that you're already talking about the sex you have, and you're going to get some new ideas about how to do that, how to deepen it, how to make it more successful. And if you're not talking about the sex that you're having, I'm going to share with you how I recommend you begin, because there are so many ways to start this conversation and conduct this conversation which do not actually accomplish the goal of having the best sex you can for the rest of your life. Ways that do not work are starting by talking about what is dissatisfying, how you're unhappy, how your spouse is not a good lover, is not a responsive lover, is not a skilled lover. All of that may be true. And it's important for you to get clear about it in your own mind, because in order to have a good conversation about the sex that you're having, you want to be clear with yourself what your experience is. But it's not actually the most successful way to have the conversation, or at least not to start there. You want to create a context which makes it explicit for both of you that you want to move forward to having better sex together. And one of the very best ways to do that is to start by talking about positive memories, good times you've had, whether it's something, and it doesn't even need to be the whole encounter, but some aspect of it. So whether it's what happened last night or this morning, or it's something you haven't experienced in 10 years, it doesn't matter. Starting with something that brings you both to moments of feeling good together sensually is a really good way to start. And honestly, for many couples, that's already like too outside the box, too weird in your own marital culture. So if the culture of your marriage is one where these topics just don't come up at all, then I recommend that you start in the following way. You can begin by talking about aspects of your relationship that really are successful. Maybe you love how you parent together, or the way you make financial decisions, or the way you mutually support one another in your careers, or the way you have really clear division of labor and so everything gets done because either it's your responsibility or their responsibility. Or maybe you really love planning vacations together. Maybe you really appreciate the way you honor one another's parents and extended family. Whatever it is, if you're in a good marriage, there are going to be areas of that marriage that really work for you. And you can begin by acknowledging them, sharing your appreciation, naming what works. And honestly, for some couples, that's enough. Just transition into acknowledging the good. And when you're ready, you can acknowledge the good in whatever areas you've chosen to share. Maybe you pick paint colors together very well. Whatever it is, you like the same kind of food. It can be very basic and it can be really grand in terms of being aligned in life purpose and wanting to do good in the world in similar ways. It really, for the purposes of what I'm teaching you right now, it doesn't matter. It's just something that you feel good about in your relationship, where you have compatibility, not necessarily sameness, but mutual respect and encouragement and support such that it's successful for both of you. So once you acknowledge that, then you can say, I really would love our intimacy to be at the same level. Or I'd love for our sex life to be as connected as I feel when we are parenting together. You can make comparisons. In other words, you start with something good and talk about wanting to have your sex life be just as good and connecting and serve the two of you so well. And again, maybe that's enough, although that could be a little bit unnerving to leave things that way. Regardless, whether you transition into that, or maybe you don't say that you want to up-level it to be as good as the others, because that's in a way inferring that it's not. And if that's complicated for you, you don't need to do it that way. In other words, I'm not talking about diluting and softening things so that it doesn't even feel real anymore. But if you're very gentle with one another, there's a lot of toleration and compromise, then let this be a gentle communication. That's really the point I want to make. And if the two of you are already used to being really pretty straightforward and direct, well, be straightforward and direct on this topic, but tone it down a little bit, because this is an area which is very tricky, and it's very easy for both of you to either consciously or unconsciously feel shame or inadequacy, rejection, and either withdraw, crumple, and feel hurt, or get defensive or blame. And everything I'm saying in this episode is to set you up to avoid that. So if you start with something positive, it's just encouraging. It is hopeful, and it means that there's the possibility that you have really wonderful experiences together without getting trapped in what doesn't work. And you might share some wonderful memories with one another. I mean, you share some wonderful memories, ask your spouse if they have any. And if it's just a matter of saying, well, that night when we were in the hotel room, and that's as explicit as it gets, that's fine. Over time, it can be more direct, because you just keep coming back to what feels aligned for you and go one mini step further. And along the way, one mini step further of, that night was good in the hotel room, and I really liked when your whole body was on top of mine. And then the next time, because I just couldn't really think of anything else. It was so amazing. And once you have kind of opened the channel of communication, once you can enjoy talking about good times together, then you can say, I'd really love if, and then you say something you want. And I really want to emphasize this point that I first learned from Mama Regina Thomashauer of the School of Womanly Arts. She taught me that in every complaint is hidden a desire. So if you're not sure what your desires are, go ahead and identify what your complaints are, not out loud, not sharing with your partner. You can even write them down and then look for how you can make it a desire. So if your complaint is that he doesn't pay enough attention to the rest of your body and goes straight to your genitals, well, your desire is that he touch more of your body and pay more attention to your body before going to your genitals. If your complaint is that she doesn't really seem to be in the experience with you, your desire is to know what would be more engaging, what would keep her present. Is there something you can do so that she doesn't check out as much? Okay, it's going to depend totally on your circumstance, what it is. If you're actually pretty satisfied with the sex you're having, but you want to explore new things, maybe you've never used a toy during sex and you want to try that, or you want to play with some power dynamics a little bit, like having one of you be more dominating and one of you be more receptive, or have sex with the lights on if that's not something you do, have sex with blindfolds on if that's not something you do. Whatever it is, bring your desires. And only once sex is a recurring topic, I'm just going to take a little detour here. So often people talk about having the conversation with your kids about sex. Well, if you're having the conversation, it's already a lose-lose, because it's not the sort of thing that you're going to cover in one conversation. You want to open up the topic, make yourself available, and say whatever the right amount is, and then be a person that your child can come to when they have questions, or if you think of something else you want to add, then you continue, but let it be an ongoing conversation throughout the teen years. The topics, the specificity, the length of conversation can vary, but this is not a one and done kind of a thing. Similarly, when you're talking with your spouse, in order to have the best sex life for the rest of your lives, this is not a one and done conversation. This is not sharing a desire once. This is not giving, stating an appreciation or savoring a really great erotic memory together. No, this is an ongoing dialogue. So if you've listened to way back to some of the early episodes of the Intimate Marriage podcast, you know this incredible statistic that the vast majority of couples talk about something other than kids and logistics, and I'm presuming fur babies too, for less than 4 minutes a day. So in talking about sex, we're definitely dialing up from less than 4 minutes to however many minutes feel good to you, feel expansive. It's not too confronting, but it's edgy enough to make you feel alive inside. And just that will blend into and season your sex life. That little bit of edginess, nervousness, I don't know, we're grown-ups here, but this conversation's a little uncomfortable. Well, that is a fantastic feeling to have when you want to stoke the erotic flames. Before I say more about that, I want to speak to the couples who aren't really having sex right now, because I know as you listen, you may have a really good marriage with good sex, and yet you're yearning for more. You feel a little bit empty and you want to feel more fulfilled, or you want more of that in closeness and connection and emotional intimacy. And I am devoted to giving you those tools to go from a good, strong marriage to one that is really fulfilling and ever evolving and delicious and yummy, and erotically satisfying. And if you have a good, solid marriage with someone you admire and love, who admires and loves you, but currently your relationship is rather dehydrated, to the point where it's been a long time since you've had sex, or you don't even really remember when it was amazing, and maybe it never was. That's also possible, for sure. I don't just say it's possible. It's like a lot of couples relate to that. If that's your situation and you can't evoke and describe a really great sexual memory, then just speak about affection. You love holding hands when you take a walk together. You love when she puts her head on your shoulder when you're watching a movie. Whatever it is, just have it be some kind of physical affection or connection. And if you don't have that, just talk about times you feel good when you're with one another. Maybe on long car rides where you're listening to music and all kinds of random topics arise. You love that. But you definitely want to affirm what is good and yummy and, I don't want to say really romantic, intimate. That is specifically something that the two of you share with one another. Specifically one another. Because in sharing those memories, you get to both feel seen and appreciated, and the relationship between you gets to thrive from putting attention on that goodness. And all of that is a setup for a win-win conversation. Now, I hope you take this and start using it. I was going to say take it and run with it, but no, I actually want you to take it and do a slow dance with it. Don't go too quickly so that it backfires. You want to gently shift the culture of your marriage to include conversation about sex. And if you're not sure how to do it after everything I've shared in this episode, you can, of course, listen again. And I just want to tell you that while I don't talk about sex particularly that much in the Aligned and Hot Marriage program, my signature independent study program, it will teach you step by step all of the communication tools you could ever want to be able to have this conversation in a meaningful way. So definitely keep that in mind if this is getting your attention, but you're not feeling equipped to proceed. Now, if you're already having conversations about the sex you're having, and so you already know the truth of what I'm saying, then let me tell you what the next level up would be. It would be when you're done having sex, as you're both lying back on the pillow, or perhaps the next morning, but there's something very special about doing it while you can still smell your body fluids and your heartbeats are just slowing down and you're just really there with one another. Don't pull out your phones. Don't start talking logistics, but instead take a moment to share a sensation you experienced. Just before you ejaculated, I felt all this heat and like my body was expanding and totally connected with yours. Or perhaps when you brushed my hair out of my face, it was just so tender and my heart melted. Okay, that's me getting in a woman's role. Let me think of something as an example for a man. When you smiled when we were looking at one another, there was just this fire in me. Or in that moment where I was rocking my hips, I felt like time stopped and I just felt so good. Or when you lightly scratch my back with your fingernails, I just love how that feels. Okay, so I've given kind of juicy erotic descriptions as inspiration, but it can be so simple. When you pressed your hand into mine, I loved how that felt. This is the next level of talking about sex so that you can know one another's experience. Because when you're growing in your capacity to share after making love in this way, it will definitely enhance how you are with one another in upcoming times. And I just want to add, to be complete here, that every marriage has seasons of less intercourse, heteronormatively speaking, less sexual intercourse, fewer orgasms, whether it's same amount of sex and fewer orgasms, or less sex and therefore less orgasms. Like, that happens during life. But when you're ready to reconnect, how quickly you do so, and perhaps even more significantly, how connected you feel to one another, with one another, while things are a little bit more fallow in the actual explicit sex department, all of that can be nurtured through having sex, and your intimate experiences with one another be something you don't just share with your bodies, but you open your hearts and vulnerably share and let your minds connect as well. So I hope that this touched and inspired you, and that you're ready for your next step with your spouse for talking about sex in ways that will serve you for the rest of your life.